Welcome to Legal Wellbeing in Action, the podcast series of the New Mexico Wellbeing Committee. We're here with our November release for the What a Healthy Legal Community Looks Like campaign, and the campaign itself aims to understand the state of well-being in legal organizations and lets local leaders help to define what well-being looks like for their populace, identify priorities for the community, measure, evaluate, and improve. So for November, we have sat down with the New Mexico Judiciary. With us today is Ms. Pamela Moore, the director of the State Bar of New Mexico's Professional Practice Group, and she will be having a discussion with Supreme Court Justice David Thomson, New Mexico Court of Appeals Judge Shammara Henderson, and Second Judicial District Court Judge David Murphy. This discussion in our episode revolves around awareness and the creation of a culture change towards the wellness of our judges, specifically how New Mexico is leading the charge on this important quest and the areas that still need improvement. From here, I will let our guests take it away, and to our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to Legal Wellbeing in Action. If you'd like to leave us feedback or continue the conversation on well-being, please email us at well@sbnm.org. We hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Tanessa, for that introduction, and thank you for having us on Legal Wellbeing in Action. Today's episode focuses on the wellness of the New Mexico judicial community. With me today to have this important conversation is Supreme Court Justice David Thomson. Welcome, Justice Thomson.
Good morning, Pam.
And we also have Court of Appeals Judge Shammara Henderson. Welcome, Judge Henderson.
Good morning, Pam.
Morning. And we have Second Judicial District Court Judge David Murphy. Welcome, Judge Murphy.
Good morning, Pam. Thanks.
Morning. Thank you all for being here. So I've prepared some questions and some discussion points for our conversation today. And as we move through this conversation, I'd like you three to feel free to jump in and add to the discussion or answer the question, even if the original question wasn't directed at you. I really like this to be an organic conversation between us. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up with the first question. I'm going to direct this to Justice Thomson. Justice Thomson, how would you say New Mexico is doing when it comes to paying attention to and providing well-being resources and services to all levels of the New Mexico judiciary?
That's what we describe as a leading question, Pam, because much of the credit is due to you. I think we're doing a very good job. We can do a better job. But the first, and I'm not kidding about that. I mean, a lot of it the credit goes to State Bar. First, recognizing the need for conversations surrounding wellness with our practitioners. And now the conversation has transitioned and included that of judges, including that of our staff, our judicial staff. So I think we're doing a good job, because the first job is to recognize it and to recognize that it's an important part of our work, as is anything else. If we are going to be productive citizens and judges and justices, we need to think about wellness in the same way we think about continuing legal education and ethics. Yeah. And you have really led the way in that. It doesn't mean we can't make improvements, and I think we'll talk about those today.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Judge Henderson, I'd like to also ask you the same question. What would you say New Mexico's doing well when it comes to the well-being of our resources and services that we provide to New Mexico judges?
I would say that we are doing very well, and I would echo Justice Thomson's thanks to you personally in being such a leader in this area for us. You know, well-being, mental health, emotional health, physical health, balance, work-life balance, all of that is something that is somewhat new, right? Just in general for people to be really thoughtful to. And I think in particular in the legal world, it's a harder stance to actually accept within our community, because, you know, lawyers like to work a lot, like to make it a priority. That doesn't change when you become a judge or join the judiciary in some other capacity. It's a hard job. And so creating focus, bringing up different issues that we all might face, and just recognizing that it's something that we need to be very thoughtful to is huge. And I'm really, really appreciative that we as a judiciary are working on that, not only for our judges across the state, but for our staff as well.
Great, great, perfect. Thank you for that answer. Judge Murphy, anything to add, anything to say about that?
Sure. Truly, it's great that the judiciary is even talking about these issues. I don't remember in my legal practice anyone in any firms or governmental agencies even talking about wellness as an issue. And it's challenging as a judge. So it's thrilling that our Supreme Court is even pioneering this conversation and creating these programs.
Right, great. Well, you guys have highlighted on something that you're right. I don't think that we've always talked or had an awareness of well-being for judiciary. And it has only been recently that we've even had that awareness and started that conversation nationally in the legal community with lawyers. And it's really only been about the last 2 years, at least for New Mexico, that I'm aware of, that we started talking about, hey, we really need to focus on the well-being of our judges. And it really was right around when the pandemic started. And we recognized that we needed to focus on that. The judges had an enormous amount of work and change, pivoting, happening at that time. And so what do we need to do to really focus on them? And so that's really when we started the Judicial Wellbeing Program. But this national conversation has also just started. There's not a lot of states that are doing anything for their judges. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in our next discussion. What are you aware of well-being efforts initiatives for judiciary nationally? So in other states, as you connect, maybe as you attend conferences, what are you seeing in other states that around this topic, the well-being of judges? And Judge Murphy, maybe I'll start with you this time.
Sure. I can tell you, I went to a judicial college training this last May, and I was talking about the new coaching program that our own judicial wellness program is pioneering. And as I shared that, judges from around the country were truly blown away that we're doing this. It's a new conversation in New Mexico, and this is certainly a new conversation nationwide. And I hope that we're able to build a model for those other states, because I don't know that they're doing as much as we are.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Judge Henderson, what about you? What have you heard nationally or in other states?
Well, to kind of piggyback off of what Judge Murphy was just talking about with our judicial coaching program or resource program that we are implementing now in New Mexico, there's about 4, I believe, other states that are doing similar projects. Some of them are mentor/coaching. I believe Colorado is the only other state that's doing a purely coaching, judicial coaching path like we are implementing here in New Mexico. And to see that happening is an amazing thing, right? You see life and career coaches emerging probably the last 5-10 years-ish, maybe the last 5 years, where it's more of a common conversation amongst entrepreneurs, CEOs. I know the national labs oftentimes utilize that type of thing. And I have known several lawyers who, own very successful law firms to utilize career coaches and life coaches, but it's very new to the judiciary. So to be able to worked with you, Pam, and of course now retired Judge Sandra Engel, and working with bringing that to New Mexico and implementing that, we've had the opportunity to train multiple volunteer judges here in New Mexico who want to be those judicial career coaches. And we're getting people, other judges who are signing up to receive the coaching from those coaches, and to have that type of professional development where you get to bounce off ideas about how to run your courtroom, how to better manage your staff. If you are interested in moving up the line and in terms of what type of court you ultimately want to end up in, those types of things, to be able to have that conversation in a creative constructive, healthy conversation and how you're going to achieve those goals, or deal with, different things that you see as issues and how you're moving forward in your own career, is a beautiful thing. And I'm really excited that we're doing that here.
Great. Thank you, Judge Henderson. And Justice Thomson, kind of the same question. What have you heard or what are you seeing nationally and in other states in terms of what they're doing to take care of the well-being of their judicial community?
I have seen mostly what it surrounds is sort of matters to resolve and tools to help and wellness. So, for example, there'll be a presentation on yoga, or what is unique, I think, about New Mexico, and I think what I haven't seen nationally is first the recognition to have the conversation about what it is and removing that stigma. And one of the things we wrestled with early on, Pam, was, do we place this program with the Supreme Court or the state bar? Because judges inherently, everybody's already examining their decision making. That's what we do, and we're criticized, good and bad, for it. I think they're very sensitive to the idea that in addition to the way they're analyzing case, someone is going to think that that decision is based on something else other than legal analysis. So they're very hesitant to talk about wellness and mental well-being. So while I see a lot of excellent programs on how to improve it, I think what I haven't seen and what I think was effective here was the honest conversation about some of the traumas that judges and staff face in their everyday work, and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, great. Well, that's a great segue into, I'm glad we're talking about what we are doing to be proactive and to put a focus on this area. But let's also talk about why we're doing this. And I think you just hit on kind of one of the things. But I'd like to talk about what you perceive to be the biggest challenge to your well-being in your professional role, and what are you observing in your colleagues as challenges, as struggles when it comes to well-being? And there was a national study that was done, a few years ago, 3 years ago, that was focused on the well-being of judges. But I'd like to really understand, what are you seeing as challenges? What are you seeing as struggles? What do what is personally what's affecting you, and then what are you seeing with your colleagues? And Judge Henderson, maybe I'll start with you.
I think one of the things that is something that always comes up in CLEs, whether you're talking about wellness or not, is isolation of being a judge, right? And I think in particular, you go from this, practice where you are probably going to court quite a bit. You're interacting with a lot of lawyers as friends. You have to run a campaign to become a judge. So obviously, that you're out in community and you're used to being around people and having a lot of relationships. And then you become a judge and you don't have to completely cut all that off, right? But there are ethical limits in how you can interact with people, and ethical limits, and you can't engage in politics anymore. So there's like this big piece of your life that you probably worked on fairly hard to achieve that you now are in some ways, taking a significant step back from. And I think, in New Mexico, an interesting thing is I was one of the judges who came in during the pandemic, and we had quite a few judges come in during the pandemic. So not only do you have the isolation of the position you're taking, but you have, a 2.5 year pandemic isolation that everybody's feeling on top of that. So I think finding ways to create that balance of understanding the boundaries that you have to maintain as a judge, but also finding things that bring you joy, bring you peace, bring you ease, to be able to have that balance to make up for some of the things that you used to do prior to becoming a judge.
Yeah. So Judge Henderson, let me just add, so did you feel, like was it a double whammy for you with the pandemic? Did you feel that? And I guess talking to other judges that came on about the same time, you know, is that what you saw in your colleagues is, yes, we already feel isolated, but this was kind of a double whammy in coming on during a pandemic?
Oh, certainly. Because not only, you know, again, you have your professional boundaries that you now have to maintain. You're limited in being able to see family that you wanted to see, or friends, you know, that you would normally see, because all of us were in our homes working from home, or you would go to your office and close the door, right? And so it was trying to really like intentionally find places that you could relax and be yourself and be able to vocalize these new situations, not only professionally, but personally throughout the last year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you use the word intentional, because I think we do need to be intentional about well-being for ourselves. And then when we're also trying to put in place resources, services, efforts, you know, we need to be intentional about this. So it sounds like you found a way to be intentional and to self-care, take care of yourself around this isolation.
Yes, definitely.
Great. All right, Justice Thomson, I'm going to ask you the same question. So what are the biggest challenges for you personally, and then what are you seeing in your colleagues as challenges when it comes to well-being?
So what I've seen with my colleagues, I agree with Judge Henderson. When we talk with them, a common theme is isolation. It's important to remember, and I remind groups I talk to, both judges inside the judiciary and outside, we are one of the most heavily regulated government entities of the three branches. We go through Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission. We have a Judicial Standards Commission. Some of these judges are elected. Then you're making decisions, and courtrooms are where conflicts go, right? That's what we do. We resolve conflict. So we're in the conflict, and you have to make that decision. And if you're criticized for the decision based on our rules of ethics, you can't really respond. And that's an element of that isolation. There's no outlet. And so I see that as a common theme and concern of our courts. I would add to that, probably what falls second to that is fatigue. And it's decisional fatigue. It's having to deal with these conflicts every day, which is what we signed up to do, make these decisions. And then just be pretty exhausted by that. And when we add the external pressures that you just talked with Judge Henderson about due to COVID, it's a lot. It adds to that fatigue. Personally, you know, I hope we'll highlight this a little more down the road, but I've had to it has to be intentional. I've developed bad habits through 20 years of practice, which don't improve my wellness. And one of them, Judge Henderson talked about, which is our natural tendency as lawyers to just plow through things and work through things. So as more pressure builds on our obligations, we have a tendency to just try and work through it without being intentional about, well, we'll get the work done, but we have to be really deliberate about how we plan our lives so that we can continue to function and not burn out. And so that's something, you know, I've learned from my colleagues, and that has helped me a lot, that it's really a matter in some parts of rebuilding your habits.
Got it. Great. Thank you for sharing, Justice Thomson. And Judge Murphy, what about you with yourself, challenges and what you're seeing in your colleagues, and you know, what new challenges did you see in moving up to district, you know, coming from Metro Court?
Sure. So when I joined the bench, it was in 2019, and we had a year pre-pandemic. And navigating the isolation was a challenge initially that was only further compounded by the pandemic. And then the new challenge became adapting to new technologies and new procedures. And as judges, we had to be leaders, and we couldn't just wait for the world to settle down. We had to figure out Google Meets that first week, and had to figure out how not to have an inappropriate reaction on Zoom, and how to instruct everyone to mute and unmute. And so there were real challenges with maintaining composure, not being frustrated like the entire world was, while also navigating the isolation. And it's easy to forget when you're a judge in your own courtroom or your own Zoom courtroom that you do have a community of judges. And so I had to constantly remind myself to call and check in, and also make sure I wasn't losing my mind, that I'm not the crazy one. Those were real challenges initially. And moving over to district court, there are new pressures. As Justice Thomson talked about, we have media scrutiny constantly. I think I told you that I have to leave this podcast at 11 because I've got some media cases, and we're under constant scrutiny, but it's up to me to make a good record in the courtroom, and but I cannot control what happens outside of the courtroom. And that was an unexpected challenge in this job, especially in the Zoom era where everyone pops in to watch. So those have been some challenges that I did not expect in joining the bench, and then especially in district court.
All right, and it sounds like you also are finding ways to navigate and self-care around those. And
it takes work. You have to be deliberate about these things. You cannot forget to take care of yourself. So
right.
When I leave, that's the transition period, and that's something I have to be conscious of each day when I leave the courthouse.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing. So we've talked a little bit about the things New Mexico is doing to focus on the well-being of our judicial community. We've also talked about the challenges that we've seen, especially over the last 2 or 3 years. What could should we be doing different or better? So this is really, where should we go from here? What are we not focusing on that we need to? What do we need to create that we haven't yet? So I'd really love to hear your thoughts on where are we going? Where should we be going with well-being? Not can we do it, but what should we do? Justice Thomson, can I hand that over to you?
Sure, thank you, Pam. I don't know if I'd answer it what we could be doing differently, because I don't think we're doing anything incorrectly. Are there areas that we can improve? Probably. I think that the 2 areas of feedback we get from the judges, and it goes back to the isolation point, is they are most comfortable talking amongst themselves, meaning with other judges. And it hits maybe a little bit on the coaching. Our greatest success, for example, in conclave on this topic is giving judges the ability to talk with other judges or staff in other districts. So they are comfortable. If I'm in Bernalillo and I talk to someone in Taos County or Doña Ana, that they are confronting the same issues I'm confronting as a judge up north. And that's very comforting, and it builds sort of, it tears down that stigma that we talked about before. And it's a more comfortable space for judges than going external. We're just not, we're told our whole lives, don't talk to other people about what you do in your courtroom, right? So I think that is very effective. I very much believe, as I touched on before, at least for me, it's very deliberate. It's a habit forming You build bad habits and you can build good habits. And that takes some leadership. I was with a colleague at a continuing legal education class, and she looked very exhausted. And I talked with her, and she said, well, I'm in hearings in between these classes. And I told her, that's not good, right? I mean, the problem with technology in this platform is you're always available. You're always available, either to look at email or do this. I said, you need to do one well and then do the other well, or you're just going to stress yourself out. And it's just a matter of habit. I did that too. And what I learned was I didn't do either things well when I was multitasking. And I think if we can, both have the conversation, remove the stigma, and then build in or give suggestions for better habits, I think those are, some of the areas I would look for in the future. But again, I wouldn't say we do anything differently. I think we're on the right path.
Okay, great. All right, I took down some notes. As I should, I can do some of these. So small group discussions, be intentional, which is something all three of you have said, in setting boundaries and creating those better habits. And it really is about, awareness of what works well for you and doesn't work well for you. And then I think I also heard kind of these tools and tips that we can give judges to maybe create those new well-being skills. So let's see, Judge Henderson, how about what do you think? What could we be doing different, better? What should we be doing if we were just thinking out of the box when it comes to well-being? How could we better serve our judges?
So the thing that comes to mind, right, is perhaps an intentional mentoring program, right? So because the coaching's not mentoring, right? The coaching is that you have a person to kind of reflect ideas off of and, try to figure out ways to better what you're doing, which is different from a mentor saying, hey, I've been where you are. Here are some things that I've done. These are things that you should know. Going to what Justice Thomson was saying, right? I see you doing these things. Let's talk about it. This might not be the healthiest way to move forward. Take it from me. I've been there, right? And I know different courts throughout our state have their own individual mentoring, but sometimes that might be helpful, right? To have, if you're in district court and you want to mentor and your mentor is maybe a district court in another jurisdiction or another district, right? And so you might feel a little bit better having that honest conversation with them and taking on that mentorship. We also have so many new judges. I don't recall the number at conclave, but it was a high number of new judges, right? And so just being able to tap into the wealth of knowledge and experience from our more experienced judges and be able to have that mentorship. I think, something official like your first year you become a judge, you get assigned a mentor, right? And have that ability to grow in that space and have a safe space to really learn what it is that you're doing would be really helpful in my mind.
Great, thank you. All right, I wrote that down too. And then Judge Murphy, what about you? What do you think in terms of just out of the box? What could we be doing? Should we be doing?
Yeah, I think it's important that judges build a sense of community amongst themselves. Justice Thomson is right. We feel most comfortable talking to each other. And there were moments at the conclave that were just moments of joy. As for the first time in a few years, we got to see and connect with each other because even amongst the rural and the urban judges, we have a lot in common. And when we finally get to connect and talk about those things, that's when we're able to problem solve. You learn things from other judges, better practices that you can adopt in your own jurisdiction. And so really what I'd like to see moving ahead is more opportunities to build community and connect with other judges outside of what happens in June. I can tell you that was a great time for me to reconnect with my friend, Judge Henderson. And there were some other judges that I hadn't seen in years, and it led to some moments for professional improvement as well. So that's what I'd like to see moving ahead. That's an area of opportunity for improvement.
Great. Thank you, Judge Murphy. Okay, so I'm hearing this from all three of you. Small group discussions connect. We like to problem solve, and we really want to build community. So that conversation that I can have with other judges throughout the state, and just feeling this connectedness with other judges throughout the state, is what I'm hearing is probably the biggest, what I'm taking away needs to happen.
So Pam, can I add one other thing?
Absolutely.
So, I don't want to suggest that it's all sort of on you and your program. I think what also would be beneficial is identifying those areas that impact wellness that, for example, the Supreme Court controls. There's all these external pressures that if we can relieve some of that stress, for example, security, if a district court is worried about their personal safety, right, that's something that's impacting their wellness that your program may have a hard time dealing with, but something we need to address. Whether they're paid an honest wage for the work they do causes economic stress. So if you can I think it'd be helpful if there's areas in which you identify that need to be worked on institutionally, that you let us know. I think that would be very helpful.
Great, thank you for adding that. Thank you, that's helpful. So I was gonna ask, what would be the barriers? We talk about the things that would be great for us to have. What do you see maybe as the barrier to that connectivity, that building community, that getting judges together in small groups? And then the other stresses that Justice Thomson just talked about. You know, what are the barriers that we have to really taking care of our judges? So I'm going to open that up to who would like to go first on that one.
Sure, I'll go first on that.
Sure.
You know, I think the real barrier is we're busy. The courthouse doors remain open. Our Zoom links remain open. So it's tough. Even to take an hour off today meant some sacrifice for the rest of my docket. So truly, it can be a very busy job. It's hard to step away and be intentional about taking care of yourself and connecting with other judges. And then truly, we're one of the biggest geographical states. So it's hard. I don't just get to run into my friend Judge Kennelly in Raton unless it's a very deliberate moment. So those are the challenges we have.
I totally agree. Any Judge Henderson or Justice Thomson, what are the barriers? Either one, you want to jump in?
Judge Henderson, go ahead.
I don't think I have a lot to, you know, I would just kind of echo what Judge Murphy's talking about. You know, all of us are extremely busy. And of course, you know, we've just talked about being intentional for, I like to say life-work balance versus work-life balance, but trying to be intentional of creating that community with other judges can be difficult. Because of course, then there's even some ethical things that you got to think about that in terms of layering of courts and how you build friendships with other judges as well. So I would see that just as like the biggest challenge is the amount of time that it takes to do the position versus finding time to create community amongst other judges would be the biggest challenge. And also, as we just discussed, our biggest wish.
Yes. Justice Thomson?
I agree. I think scheduling is the wrong word, but we are so busy and there are so many different ideas and projects and different things pulling judges in different directions all the time, especially with the new program. It's really the hardest part of a new program is getting its foundation, getting its roots, and then I think it can succeed. I mean, we have these requirements for continuing legal education and professionalism, and it should be as well established as that. It really should, not as a mandatory concept, but a concept that it is as equally important as those areas. So it's really, I think, in the short term, the challenge is going to be making sure that you have a strong foundation and roots, and then we can go from there. And then of course there's always the budget constraints, and you're very good at being very creative, as are we, in trying to improve wellness, given the budget resources, but that's always a consideration.
All right, agreed. So we only have a few minutes left. I did want to highlight, the Judicial Wellness Program has been up and running for the last couple of years. Most recently, like Judge Henderson said, we have added a judicial coaching resource that we have been working on for the last year and a half. One of the things that I think this coaching resource will do is really help judges with the isolation piece. And give them a thought partner, and it is a scheduled time. So as I hear you guys talking, I'm thinking, okay, mentoring would most likely be a scheduled time with another judge to talk. Coaching, the same thing. We have judicial roundtables that we do for municipals and magistrates, and would love to expand that. Also a scheduled time with a small group, with connecting, with colleagues across the state. So lots of areas for expansion and growth, and exactly to what Justice Thomson just said is these all take time to get established and to grow roots, and for people to hear about them and want to use them, right? Want to use that resource, or want to capitalize on that service. And so I think we're headed in a good direction with judicial wellness. I'm just so grateful that we've embarked on this journey, that we're actually having these conversations now. And I'm grateful that you three have added enormously to this conversation today, and that I'm really excited about where judicial well-being is going for the state of New Mexico. So we have a couple minutes left. Anybody have anything to add just in the last couple minutes that we have? I'll just open it up.
So I'll start. I think the three of us are here with you, Pam, because we believe it's important. It's fundamental to the well-being of the judiciary. And if we're going to recruit and keep good judges, I think we all share the belief that the work you do is critically important. So I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, similarly, I think looking at well-being is on par with, or at the same level of competency at this point, right? And really putting out that message to say your well-being is equal to your mental or ability to be a judge, right? It's just as important as understanding the case law, the statutes, the rules that are applicable to the cases that you're moving forward. And putting, of course, the resources behind that equally, I think that's also important. And so I'm really looking forward to what we have coming in the future, and I'm very grateful for what we've done over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm excited about the direction that we're headed. It's in the past, it's always been easy to think of the courts as institutions. And this is the first time we're really thinking about the judges as people. And that's how we recruit and retain talent in the judiciary and acknowledge a reality of what we do. And so I'm excited about the direction that we're headed.
Great. Thank you all. Very well said. And I appreciate each one of you. This is not done by a single person or even a few people. This is done by a whole community, a whole army that, that is passionate about taking care of each other and themselves. And so thank you all for being here today. And thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you for listening to Legal Wellbeing in Action. And until next time, be safe and be well.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Wellbeing Committee and the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky eLearn. Intro music is by Gil Flores. the views of the presenters are that of their own and are not endorsed by the State Bar of New Mexico. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have